The midnight harvest. The small rural village seemed asleep at the end of autumn, with few lights on and a light mist spreading across the abandoned fields. There was one farm, however, that drew everyone's attention, an old, forgotten property that everyone avoided. The Crow Farm, as it was called, was a place that seemed ordinary during the day, but became a mystery at night, surrounded by terrifying stories. Strange lights, disturbing sounds, and an ever-present corn harvest that no one knew who tended or cared for. Clara, Tomas, Helena, and Miguel, longtime friends, were always looking for adventures, especially Miguel, who never seemed to back down from a challenge. That night, Miguel suggested something bolder than usual. "Let's spend the night at the Crow Farm," he said with a provocative smile. Clara, always more superstitious, hesitated. "You know what they say about that place," she murmured as Helena and Tomas exchanged nervous glances. "Just stories," Miguel said impatiently. "No one has ever proven there's anything there. It'll be an adventure. Who knows, we might find something interesting." And so, despite some reluctance, the group decided to go. The road to the farm was long and winding. Dry trees lined the path, and the sound of the wind rustling through the fallen leaves was the only sound accompanying them. When they arrived at the property, the farm looked even more intimidating than they had imagined. The house was in ruins, with broken windows and doors creaking in the wind. But what caught their attention the most was the cornfield. Unlike the rest of the farm, the field seemed untouched, with tall, golden stalks swaying gently in the night breeze. "This is strange," Helena said, eyeing the stalks. "No one's lived here in decades. Who's taking care of this?" Tomas shook his head without an answer. "Maybe we should explore the house first," he suggested, trying to shake off the growing sense of unease inside him. Inside the house, the atmosphere was heavy. The floor creaked under their feet, and the air was thick with the smell of mold and decay. Clara looked around and noticed something carved into the walls. "What is this?" she asked, pointing to symbols that looked ancient and unsettling. They were etched in circles, with runes none of them could recognize. Miguel took a picture with his phone and started searching online. "I'm not finding anything, but I'm sure I've seen something like this before," he said, puzzled. "Maybe it's some kind of old language." Meanwhile, Tomas went to the living room window and peered outside. He saw something move between the rows of corn. A figure, quick and silent. He blinked, and the shadow vanished. "Did you guys see that?" he asked, turning to his friends. But when they all looked out the window, there was nothing there, just the field, swaying in the wind. "It must have been the wind moving the stalks," Miguel said, trying to sound nonchalant. But Tomas wasn't convinced. Later, when the sun had completely disappeared, they decided to camp inside the house. Miguel, always the most adventurous, suggested making a small fire in the broken fireplace. Clara, however, remained awake. Something about the stillness of the night left her feeling uneasy. She walked over to the window again and saw something that made her heart stop. Small lights floated across the cornfield. They looked like fireflies, but larger, glowing with a soft and mysterious light. Fascinated, Clara called the others. "Come see this." Miguel, Helena, and Tomas joined her. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the lights dance among the stalks. It was as if the lights were forming patterns, almost like a ritualistic dance. Clara stepped forward, drawn to the glow of the lights. Tomas grabbed her arm. "Wait, where are you going?" But she couldn't stop. Something seemed to be calling her. Clara slowly walked toward the field, as if in a trance. Tomas ran after her, shouting her name. But as soon as they crossed the first row of stalks, something changed. The field around them seemed to close in. The lights, once distant, now floated all around them, and the air felt thick, almost unbreathable. Clara kept walking, mumbling words Tomas couldn't understand. "Clara, stop," he shouted, but she didn't react. He grabbed her by the shoulders and tried to shake her, but her eyes were glazed over as if she were trapped in another reality. That's when Tomas felt a presence behind him. He turned slowly and saw a tall, skeletal figure draped in dark rags. The thing had no face, just a shadow where its features should be. In its hands, it held something that looked like a scarecrow, but it was made of human bones, tied together with leather cords and grotesquely suspended. Tomas tried to scream, but fear paralyzed him. He grabbed Clara and ran back to the house. When they finally escaped the field, the lights vanished, and the figure disappeared among the stalks. But something was terribly wrong with Clara. She wasn't speaking. Her eyes were still fixed, and her skin was cold as ice. Back in the house, Miguel and Helena were terrified to see Clara's state. She trembled, her lips muttering things they couldn't understand, and her skin was pale. "What happened out there?" Miguel asked, frantic. I don't know," Tomas replied, still in shock. There was something out there, something that wasn't human. Miguel began examining the symbols on the walls again. "These symbols," he said, his voice trembling. "I sent them to a professor of mythology I know," he just replied. Miguel read the message aloud. "These symbols are part of a very ancient pagan ritual used to summon entities from the underworld in exchange for bountiful harvests. Leave immediately." Terror gripped them all. The cornfield, always perfect, was not natural. They had invaded a sacred place, interrupting something beyond comprehension. "We need to leave now," Helena said, her voice shaking with fear. But when they looked out the window, they realized the way back to the village was blocked. The cornfield had grown, surrounding the house on all sides like a green and golden wall. Outside, heavy footsteps echoed through the night. They were slow, dragging, and seemed to come from all directions at once. The cornkeeper, the skeletal figure Tomas had seen, was approaching. In its hands, it held the bone scarecrow, and its ragged robes dragged across the ground. Clara, still in a trance, suddenly stood up and began walking toward the door. "What are you doing?" Helena screamed, trying to stop her, but Clara only muttered, "The harvest must be done. He's here." She opened the door and walked out to meet the keeper. The keeper lifted the scarecrow and placed it over Clara, wrapping her in the leather cords and bones. To the horror of her friends, the scarecrow's light began to glow intensely, and the cornfield violently rustled as if it were alive. Miguel, Helena, and Tomas tried to run after her, but an invisible force held them in place. With a supernatural glow, the cornfield began to emit a hissing sound, as if the stalks themselves were whispering. The keeper disappeared, and Clara, wrapped in the scarecrow, seemed to be absorbed by the field, merging with it. When the sun rose, the field was silent again. Everything seemed normal, except for Clara's absence. There was no trace of her left, as if she had never existed. The group, shaken, managed to escape the farm, but the harvest continued. The corn, more golden than ever, kept growing. And the lights in the field still shone at night, waiting for the next harvest.